at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the agenda. Any additions or corrections?
I think Shar had something. Did you have something?
Yes, just this morning from Jamie, we had a satisfaction of mortgage. This has to do with through the clock company, the permanent clock. They paid off their mortgage early. Their loan was low, so we're running that from today. We have that page.
Okay.
Put it under discussion, number
Yep.
5. Any other additions or corrections?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes from last week?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last week.
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to public comment period. A reminder, no personal attacks, sir.
Right.
Just come up and say your name.
And say your name and township.
My name is Jack Knight. I'm from Alameda County, Iowa. I am a member of the Soil and Water Commission there, and I'm also an RC&D board member, lifelong resident of Alameda County and landowner. Alameda County just recently got done dealing with the frac sand issue. We came together as a county. As a Soil and Water Commissioner, I was part of the process in writing our ordinance. And we got input on the county level from our Conservation Board, Soil and Water Board, maybe more importantly, the Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau chimed in very early on at a public meeting, turned to our supervisors and said, make sure this doesn't happen, meaning industrial scale frac sand mining. And believe me, nothing happens or doesn't happen in Alameda County without the Farm Bureau. But the county didn't stop there. We considered also the landowners who wanted to mine, the ones that originally filed a permit request. The county road engineer, the sheriff, the economic development office, and the tourism office, that would be the RC&D office in Postville, all had input into this. And keep in mind that we have the highest unemployment rate in the state of Iowa. All these things were considered. And keep in mind that Alameda County is a very conservative county. We don't have partisan politics in Alameda County because there is no other partisan. It's all Republican. And the Planning and Zoning Board, mostly our zoning administrator, wrote this ordinance with input from Minnesota, other ordinances in Wisconsin. What this document is not, and I have, oh, by the way, I have 3 copies of that I gave your secretary. And that's also online at our county website. And I'd just like to point out, Houston County is a mirror image of Alameda County. It's just a state border there. Very similar politics, very similar interests in tourism and farming, as well as job development. And I would just urge your county, now I don't know exactly where you are in the process with ordinance writing. I'm not following you that closely, except I just hear that it's in process here. I would just urge you to do the conservative thing. The conservative thing to do is to adopt an ordinance similar to Alameda County's. And if you're interested, I would be willing to come up and be on the agenda if you want to discuss some of the thinking that went into our ordinance and some of the reasoning behind it. So
We do have it, and we use it as part of our study.
okay, well, I would urge you to think of it as a conservative document.
Did it pass the final?
Yes.
I mean, we had the draft to begin with. Okay.
Well, that's the final, and
This is
it's probably quite a bit different than the draft.
Okay, sounds good. I'll
That's the
make sure
final.
Rick gets it, and we'll have it.
Yeah.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Van Gorp, Yucatan Township. I'd like to start by first saying that facts are not personal attacks. We cannot discuss any issue if we're not allowed to say someone's name. Are we calling speaking the truth a personal attack now? It's time to quit hiding behind the no personal attacks line. Regarding the finding of facts for the Erickson mine, there are no findings. This is a rationalization, and it is not factual. By the way, how can you make a decision before you have the finding of facts? That seems a little backwards. As usual, we were not allowed to see the finding of facts until it was approved. And just like the appeal that we made against that mine, it wasn't returned until after the approval. Therefore, we were never allowed to present evidence to counter your lies. In your finding of facts, first conclusion of law is, because no evidence of violation warranting a hearing exists. This is entirely incorrect. I have given you the evidence yet again, circled in blue on that paper. All of you knew this, including Dan Griffin, Rick Frank, and Bob Scanlon. I have told you verbally, I have emailed you, I have had one-on-one conversations, and I spoke about them at this meeting, prior meetings. Not one of you can claim that you did not know these facts. The last time I confronted Bob Scanlon with the fact that I had eyewitness account of a violation, he went like this to me. "So you say," and went back to looking at his desk. As far as I'm concerned, eyewitness testimony does constitute evidence. Our appeal was valid. It's based on the fact that Rick and Bob's decision that there was no permit violations is false. And I've just given you the documentation of 6 violations. Once again, you have denied due process, and all decisions are based on this lie and therefore invalid. Are you seriously going to tell me that none of those 6 constitutes a permit violation?
Thank you, Brian.
Are you going to, give me 30 seconds here, this will be the last time I address the board. Are you going to address this abortion of justice or not? This is not a miscarriage because that implies something beyond your control. This was knowingly and intentionally done to enable wrong behavior. Are you going to address this or not? A simple yes or no from the board chair would suffice.
Thank you. We'll talk about
Will you address it?
We will talk about it during our comments.
This is a typical example of the responsiveness of this board.
Brian, your time is up.
Yes. And there's no use to address this board in the future because you don't care about democracy, you don't care about citizen input, and above all, you don't care about justice, and your incompetence disgusts me.
Anyone else wish to address the board? Okay, Brian.
Morning, Commissioners. I have a couple items here for the board this morning. First item is we had a bid opening for project SAP 28-603-22 yesterday. We had this for a bridge replacement on County State Highway 3 going into Brownsville. We had 3 bidders on the project. The low bidder was Brennan Construction out of Lansing, Iowa. Their total bid was $721,847.25. Our estimate was $728,286, so it came in just under 1% under the budget. So I'm going to recommend approval of the contract to Brennan Construction, and I'd like to start work out there in about a month.
We talked about this at committee, so I'd like to make a motion to go ahead with Brennan Construction at Lansing for the job.
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next item I have is somewhat related to the same approval. When we bought the land out there for the right-of-way for this project on County 3, we had some landowners that wanted the county to remove the fencing, install new fencing for this project. Typically when we buy land, we ask the landowner, we pay the landowner for the cost of the removal and the installation of new fencing. In this case, they wanted us to do it. So we went out, tried to get several quotes, only actually got one. Person returned the quotes back to us, give us some price, and that was Steve Theobald out of Eitzen. Gave us a quote of $2,772 to remove and install a new fencing, temporary fencing that's needed for this project. And then also a quote for $373.60 for some fencing over along our County 8 project within Winnebago County. So I'd like to get approval on that today as well.
Move to approve?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Then I have one final item. We had quotes opened yesterday for pavement marking around the county. This is the annual striping contract due for roadways, center lines, fog lines, as needed throughout the county, along with bicycle lanes in the Crescent area. We had 3 companies provide quotes back to us. The low bid was traffic marking services at $94,090.89. The estimate was $96,737.50, so 2.74% under that estimate. The other 2 contractors were a little bit over $100,000. So I'm going to recommend that the board approves traffic marking services to do the pavement marking for us this year, and then part of our quotes was to get the Crescent bike lane striped in the next, or by August 1st. So we'll get the bike lane striped right away. The rest of the county will be striped after the seal coatings.
Where are you from?
Traffic marking services. I better not say exactly.
No, okay, it doesn't really matter, yes. Move to approve.
Yeah, they do a lot of work in this area.
They do, okay.
Further discussion? Hope that wasn't any outside pressure on that one, huh? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guess we're running a little ahead of time.
Good morning, Commissioners. I can pull it out for you. Okay. We have been very busy in between HR and the Sheriff's Office. We conducted interviews last week, and a very competitive pool, had a lot of interest in our positions. And at this time, we'd like to make several recommendations. We'd like to start with recommendations for the full-time positions. We would be, just to give you a little overview, we'll be changing the status of part-time folks to full-time. Like I said, it was a very competitive process, but with external applicants as well. We have 3 full-time positions that we have recommendations on, and at this time, because that necessarily resulted in 3 half-time positions opening up, we today are prepared to make a recommendation for 2 of those half-time positions. And I'll be coming forward next week with the 3rd half-time position recommendation. We have are in discussions with an applicant. So at this time, and also I might mention that there is for the Mr. Scott Wren. Once we get to that point there, we will That recommendation is going to be conditioned upon the successful completion of the criminal background check that I will word it for you. I'd like to take them one at a time, if you, just for clarity. I'm sorry, I apologize. I have an update with some pay information on it for you. Make copies and set their copy in there. So we are recommending to change Kelsey Connor's employment status as a probationary half-time .5 FTE to full-time 1.0 FTE B232 at her current rate of pay, which is $19.29 an hour, which was the rate change effective July 1 of this year. And that would be effective July 27th, 2014. Do you want to make a comment regarding?
Kelsey's been working with us. She started out as a 67-day employee. She then became a .5, like she said, and doing very well in the job. Just still has some training coming on for dispatch. The jailing part of it, they're fully trained.
You want separate motions on each one?
I would like that. I need to put that
I'll make a
in
motion that we
personnel
approve
policy.
Kelsey Connor's employment status as probationary half-time to full-time.
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Secondly, it's the same scenario, if you will, for Mr. Michael Rasmussen. Change his employment status as a regular half-time. Excuse me. You notice that, I will point this out, you notice that, I'm sure I'd like to make sure that the minutes reflect this, that Kelsey Connor's employment is currently a probationary position, and so it maintains its probationary status until she completes the contractual requirements. Okay. Michael Rasmussen's employment status is currently as a regular half-time .5 FTE and jailer dispatch, and we're making a recommendation to change that to a 1.0 FTE. This is a floating position, and his current rate of pay, which is $19.29 per hour, effective July 27th, 2014.
And again, Mike came with us as a 67-day employee, worked as a part-time position, and knows both the trades of the jail and dispatch this time, trained in.
I move to approve Michael Rasmussen to a full-time jailer dispatcher, floating.
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thirdly, we're requesting a change of Michael Meredith's employment status as a probationary half-time to a probationary full-time position while he completes his current probation and all credit going forward, and his current rate of pay of $19.29 per hour effective July 27th, 2014.
And once again, Michael came with us as a 67-day employee. Increases state that as a part-time, half-time position. Fully trained in the jail, currently in dispatch training at this time. All three of them are very good employees.
And this will be probationary. Also, wait, let's change. I move to approve Michael Meredith's employment status, jailer dispatcher to full-time.
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Second.
Further discussion?
I just have one question.
Yes.
So they stay at the same pay rate when they're probationary as when they're
They were all hired as step one,
okay.
and upon successful completion of their probation, the contract currently has a 6-month probationary period. Upon that completion of 1,040 hours, they move to, they're evaluating, we come forward either to extend their probation, to recommend regular status, or determine that we no longer are in need of their employment. I'll look at that.
I guess what she
I come back. Is that your question about Mr. Rasmussen?
Yeah, I just thought it,
He would be at step 2.
Step 2, yeah. We'll reevaluate his again. So he should be at the step 2, I believe, so.
okay, thanks.
For Rasmussen.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We would like to hire a Zachary Swedberg as a probationary half-time jailer dispatcher at $19.29 per hour, step 1.
And again, Zach was currently a 67-day employee, trained as a jailer at this time, has not been trained in dispatch as of this time, that'll be in the future.
Motion to approve the hiring of Zach Swetberg as a probationary half-time.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then lastly, for this, we recommend hiring Scott Wren as a probationary half-time jailer jailer dispatcher at a wage of $19.29 per hour, effective July 27th, conditioned upon successful completion of the background checks that they do in the sheriff's office.
Motion to approve Scott after he's gone through his background check as a probationary half-time jailer dispatcher.
A second?
So Scott is not started working?
He is not.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And just for clarity, with regards to Mr. Rasmussen's appointment, it would be at his current step. And if that's step 2, this does not change any of their current step placements or current wages. No impacted by this.
Thank you.
Just a last minute addition. I invited Rick to come and address the board this morning. Rick and I have been very busy. Rick's been very busy, I should say, lately. And we'll be working on the draft of the proposal. We've received the preliminary historic structures report for this building, and Rick's been very diligent about drafting the proposal for the Historical Society grant. We have a deadline of this Friday for the preliminary draft review. However, that's not what we're here really to talk about today, so, Rick?
Unfortunately, on Friday, last Friday, I received a job offer for another city near the metro area, and so I submitted my 2 weeks notice to CETA, and after next week we'll no longer be with CETA. So we are working on a transition plan to make sure that all the projects continue forward, and hope to, in the meantime, get somebody in here to walk through everything that we're in the middle of right now, so we can continue the work that we've been doing for the last 15 months or so.
Ron immediately contacted us and let us know this and that. Started working with our office closely on.
So can we deny your request?
I was just thinking, my mom should be able to.
Unfortunately not, no. It was a little unexpected for me, and a little surprising, and the timeline is unfortunately very short. But we'll make the transition as smooth as we possibly can.
The best get somebody as good as
Yeah.
or will be coming to play.
So I'd like to congratulate Rick and also publicly thank him for all the services that we've received. It's been I know when we entered this agreement with CETA, we weren't quite sure how it was all going to shake out because we really hadn't gone that direction before. I wasn't sure how contracting with them for 14 hours a week, if that was going to serve our needs or not, but it has well served our needs. Rick came in with very open mind and a lot of tools in his tool chest to help us, and I think I know I really appreciated working with him, so thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, awesome job.
I agree too. Tremendous asset.
Good luck.
Thank you, thank you.
She did such a good job. The changes in the last year. Human service reports.
I just want to remind the county board and anybody else who might be around that we're going to have one of our employees retire, Gail Stortz. She has worked here for 34 years, and her retirement party is July 30th, right? Yeah. July 30th, and it's from 2:30 to 4:30. That's a Wednesday afternoon. And it's in the, it's over at the CJC, or is it in the old commissioner's room? I can't remember. Well, there's flyers around, so I guess you'll have to check the flyer. But anyway, we want to wish her well, and I thought, well, we should announce that because this is the last county board meeting. Other than that, really, the only thing I have going on, well, there's lots of things going on. As far as an update goes, I'm working on a reprocurement for our MCO coverage for people over age 65. Last year, and I did talk about this in committee some, last year we did the people under age 65. There were 3 companies, and it's a pretty lengthy, complex survey that we submit about which MCOs have the coverage we need, the price we need, if they're good at following through, and how they are toward our clients and customers. Blue Plus, UCare, and Medica are the 3 companies. Those were the 3 last year. Last year we ended up with Medica and UCare. That doesn't have really any bearing on where we could end up this year with the over 65 group. Both of these reprocurement processes are once every 5 years. So again, in 5 years we'll be doing the one year and the one next year. Anyway, I'll be kind of glad when it's done, but it's interesting. It's a learning experience. So that I've been working on. And the other thing I really want to talk about just a little bit is where we are as far as our budget goes, because 6 months of the year have gone by, and I promised you at the last month's county board meeting I would bring it up. Our budget really gets broken down into 2 parts, income maintenance and then social services. And so far, well, our total budget is about $4.5 million every year. So far, in income maintenance, we're sitting, if we take away some of the timing issues and things like that, we're sitting at about 48% of our expenses, which is pretty good. We should be about 50%. Our revenues do normally lag a little behind. However, in income maintenance, this year they're actually ahead. They're at like 58%. I think a lot of that is due to our collections. We have the estate collections and expenses, and there's a timing difference in the expenses. However, we're way ahead of schedule on the collections for what we have budgeted. So that's a good thing. And then at the end, if I look at the social service side, we are sitting at 44% of revenue, which is pretty typical for this time of year because the state loves to hang on to their money. And they do that to us. And in fact, when I think like of for one example, our CREST money, we've only gotten 1 payment in for that so far. We should have gotten 2 payments. It should be divided up evenly, 1 for every quarter. That's just one of them, but there are a few more too where we're seeing a lag from the state, so that's pretty typical. Otherwise, the expenses are at excuse me, I told you the total expenses for the whole for the whole department. 39% of revenue and 39% expenses for social services. So really our expenses are behind too, which is, it's okay. We like that. I will say, I thought our commitments would be costing us more, and maybe they will. However, we're doing pretty good on those considering the number of commitments we've had. Overall, the county human services budget, combining both departments, is at 44% of revenue and 46% of expenses. So we're right on target, and that's kind of my message to you. And I was going to talk about the budgets for 2015, but I'm kind of thinking, I don't know if you want to hear that yet. You're going to get an awful lot of budgets in. One kind of real positive thing I will say about what's coming is that you allowed us to hire another disability services worker, and with that, by the time that person gets up and running, they actually end up bringing in more revenue than they cost, which is really positive because what they will do then is to help out some of our other social work programs that do not bring in more revenue that actually cost us quite a bit. So one makes up for the other. So that's a positive thing. I'm kind of curious to see how that works out in the budget because we don't know yet. We don't know the true cost of our health insurance, and we don't know what wages will be next year, those kinds of things. But anyway, that's one little positive note. And that's pretty much really all I want to talk about today, unless anybody has questions.
Gail's thing is downstairs here.
Is it? Okay. Good, I'm glad you remember.
You always said it?
Like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there should be flyers around too.
What time is that?
Did we get it? I can forward it to all.
We might have somebody send one out all county again too, as a reminder.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Since we're talking about commitments, I suppose I can go next.
Are you getting committed?
We did have another one even come in this morning. I mean, it's really not slowing down. To offset the county costs, what we did was we basically ate up one of our grants early on. And so we have two real mental health grants that we have, our CSP and our CREST grant. CSP is a little more rigid, and with most people coming in having an SPMI or severe persistent mental illness, we utilize that grant right away to cover some of the costs of placements. As an example, one placement cost like $23,000 for one person. So instead of using county funds, we end up eating up some of our grant money right away. So that's why you're not seeing those costs reflected in the county fund at this point in time. And hopefully it slows down. And we don't know, but we're trying to mitigate that impact as much as possible by utilizing some of those state grants. And hopefully, and this is going to kind of be a bittersweet ending, but it could potentially lead to getting more money next year in that CSP program, given what we spent this year. So, fingers crossed. But staying on the adult side of things, we are starting to see the impact a little bit of 245B, taking some of the, basically the licensing requirements and taking some of the freedoms away from families to utilize the services that they want to utilize. Because now the service providers have to be paid a certain amount, they have to be licensed, enrolled, whereas before you could utilize a neighbor to help with chore services and things like that. Now they have to be covered under a fiscal support entity. So it's taking away some of the freedoms that families have, is what we're finding out for that service and those types of personal support stuff and for respite care as well. Those rates have gone up, so they're going to have a little bit of impact on our waiver budgets, things like that. So we're, again, working on mitigating that and kind of trying to be creative with how we call services and provide services to families. And that's regional across the board. We have those discussions with supervisors every other month, and everybody's kind of seeing the same thing. And so moving into our main choices updates, we've got the big orientation out of the way. Now we have some training labs to kind of start our new assessment process and planning process for all the social workers. A lot of counties are looking at hiring a position. I think so far with our working in conjunction with public health, we're going to be able to kind of absorb this process and this new kind of assessment internally. So I don't think at this point we're going to ask to fill a position or add a position because of in choices. I think the way the trainings are going and how diligent our workers are, I think we'll be able to absorb that at this point in time. They're doing really well with it. They're catching on very quickly, and so I think at this point in time we're going to be okay with that.
And the other thing we're looking at is we do have an increase a little bit in chemical dependency in getting Rural 25 assessments. And one of the things that goes along with that is we contract this with Hiawatha Valley, and their rates went up significantly. And so we're trying to look at that a little bit, and we're just in the infancy of doing this and tackling this, and maybe doing some more of the Rural 25 stuff internally. Looking at bringing that back here, because when we added Lisa in kind of that waiver role and children's mental health role, she's been trained historically from other counties in Rural 25 assessments, as well as Sharon and Wendy. So looking at being able to maybe figure something out where we can be creative with our staffing and do some of that internally to cut some of the costs from that rise from Hiawatha Valley.
How many Rural 25 assessments do you?
I would have to pull the numbers, it's
Okay.
quite a few.
Okay.
This year's been quite a few. Again, commitments and CD stuff, that just,
But you could keep, like, you could bring some of them in and some of them with Hiawatha.
absolutely, and we would have to.
I'm just thinking not to take on too much for adding that.
Yep, absolutely. And in the discussion I had with Lisa and Wendy about this was, I asked them, would you be able to absorb to this point in time? At that current point in time was, well, no, but give me a month, let me see how my caseload goes. And so, looking at that, yeah, we definitely couldn't take on the full brunt of it, but at least if we could mitigate some of the costs, it would be beneficial. And we actually get reimbursed for that fairly well, I believe, for Rule 25 assessments. And so,
Well, and at the time, historically, at the time, we used to do all of them in-house. And then at that time, we do a CSER report. Now, don't ask me what CSER stands for. I can't remember, but it's a social services cost report, essentially, that shows our cost per hour of social worker. And at that time, we could go out and hire Hiawatha Valley for less money than what we would be spending having a social worker do it per hour. And that's why we did that.
Yep.
And that was why it was just really a very good cost benefit to doing that, but things have flipped, so now our cost per hour is a lot less
well,
than it
in
used to be.
the Hiawatha Valley rate increased quite a bit. And, I think what they found is they were offering such a low rate, they were very cost efficient for us. And so now I think that's starting to catch up a little bit. So there we are. So that's kind of the adult world of things. On the children's side, with placements, we're starting to look at a new procedure that kicks off January 1st, which is North Star Care, which is a way to kind of standardize placement rates for kids in care. It's a new assessment called the MAPSI that's coming into play right now, and that will kind of give us a better idea of individualistic rates for kids and tier the rates to a more or less complex system to kind of develop a rate for kids that go into care. The state says it won't really have an impact on our rates at all. It'll just be different work with social workers. We'll see. You never really know. What it does is it actually equalizes that rate, and if they go into a permanent situation with a relative or somebody else, that rate kind of carries over to them, and it's a way to kind of standardize all of it. That's what the state's looking to do. And so, we have that training coming out in 2 weeks. I'll be going to that to kind of see how that's going to impact us and play out. Not overly concerned with the 2 counties right now that are piloting it, Moore County and Goodhue. We've had mixed results. One county likes it, one county doesn't. And so, internally, we started doing what's called pre-placement meetings, which is getting an objective team to surround a family to make decisions in regards to placement when families are looking at placement. It's really to divert placement and come up with some recommendations that may be a little more creative or a little more informal that can create that safety net to keep a family together while still working on that family nucleus to kind of even lower our placement rates even more if we can. Had our first one a couple weeks ago, very positive, good feedback from the family, good feedback from the workers that were there and the other people that joined us for the meeting. So that'll continue and hopefully get better and improve as we go along. Looking at placements and rates, as a region, we are going to write a strongly worded letter to the state in regards to some of our 4E funds that we seem to be missing due to rules and procedures. Goodhue's going to take the lead. Goodhue, Wabasha, Houston, Fillmore, and Winona are all kind of starting the discussions of, I think we're missing some money here, and how can we get this back in a more efficient manner? And it's stemming from state procedures and rules that are in place that kind of stop us from collecting some funds. So we're looking at doing that and kind of seeing if there's anything we can do to recoup funds there.
And then the last thing is static group decision-making we are starting to do internally. Sent 2 workers to training to do this. This is looking at being creative with case plans and things like that to bring families together, find family members, locate resources, really look at creating permanency faster for kids, creating safety for kids. That's more internalized by the family, followed by the family, and so we can bring those resources together to really have these discussions, and it's facilitated by an objective facilitator. And so kind of building that relationship with the family and enabling our working relationship with them. And so that's going to get out and running here in the next few weeks, and that's really kind of where we're at. Any questions?
Sounds busy.
Life is busy.
All right. I'll just start out with our child support. We were supposed to go live with our EDMS last week, but we ran into some delays and difficulties with some of our training and the testing region not working correctly. So next Tuesday, we'll be back in Winona for our end user training, and we will go live then on Wednesday. And I believe the data bank is going to be sending a resource here to help facilitate. Otherwise, things are on track and looking well for that. So keep your fingers crossed that things go well next week for us. The workers are pretty much done with their scanning, so now we're just trying to prepare and determine what needs to go into our workflow to be ready for us on Wednesday when we aren't working out of those paper files any longer. So it's taken a little longer than what we had hoped, but we're getting there, so I'm kind of excited for that staff. And let's see, yesterday was a big day. Linda and I and Tess interviewed for the open financial worker positions, so hopefully next week we'll be able to bring forth to the board our candidate for that. We had, I believe there were about 30 or 35 applicants, and after the test there were 19 candidates that we went through and rated and ended up interviewing 6. So it was we had a lot of really good candidates for that process. On the financial side as well, on Friday with MNsure, as we know, the state hired a company called Deloitte to look at the MNsure system and the deficiencies and the things that are going well. I mean, we had the first presentation on that. They're looking at 5 stages: an assessment, prioritizing, implementation, stabilizing and operating the system, and then operating the manual workarounds that are out there. Currently, they're in the first 2 stages. And through the assessment, they realized that there's roughly 30 areas within MNsure that need work, that are deficient. And they came up with 3 critical fixes that need to get taken care of as soon as possible, which we've known about. The one is change in circumstances. We're not able to make changes once somebody's in there and approved. We can't make changes to their cases. We've just been able to add people on, so that's a big fix. And then the Minnesota Care and the ME renewals, and then the QHP renewals. As we know, starting in October, the open enrollment opens back up again for the following year. And at this point, the functionality isn't quite there yet within MNsure. So that's what they're going to be looking at. You know, and the list was extensive. Like I said, the biggest thing is the renewals, that they're trying to get those done. A lot of valid concerns from the counties. How are the priorities set, and when will the fixes be put into place? This is an off-the-shelf product, so we are kind of having to wait for the vendors to update and do some of the upgrades that we need. So we may see things getting fixed in groups. So we're hoping that by the time October comes, we will be ready to go. They are also, our mentor, which is Maria Stemper, will be going next week because it sounds as though the counties will be entering some of the paper applications into the system, which is new for us as well. So we'll kind of see where that goes. And then with everything else, they are converting. We had Minnesota Care cases. Those were all taken care of by the state for us here. They're converting the first round of that, so there's approximately 28,000 Minnesota Care cases that are in the process of being converted right now. And that means that if clients have to either go online or file a paper application in order to get new coverage. So we will see how this plays out. There's direction coming all the time. So it's just nice to see that they're working on some of the fixes, and hopefully we can get things working better on their end. So we've got that. And then the other thing that we have, we finally received our legislative changes. There are some big ones. The main one we're working on right now for our family cash. I've had to work with IT. We are now able and have to offer web-based interviews for certain populations. So we're looking at setting up Skype or some kind of video presence so that we can have that type of interview and face-to-face contact with our family cash clients. Hopefully we'll get that up and running soon. We need to test, I don't know if you're familiar with Skype, but you need to have an email address attached to that. And we just want to make sure that we're very consistent. So we're probably going to end up using our family banks as the contact here so that, you know, if clients are trying to email, people aren't putting in their home email addresses and that type of thing. So we just want to make sure we're set and ready to go with that. But as we've seen, technology just keeps moving forward, so we're trying to stay up with that. The other big thing with the family cash is we used to have to buy the NADA books, which were quite expensive, to determine the trade-in value of vehicles for the families we worked with. And they have finally changed legislation that allows us to use the online guides, which seems like a really small thing, but it is a really big thing because there's a big difference between some of the trade-in values that are in the NADA book and what you can find online. So that's a big thing. And then we can also allow personal statements now, where if somebody's having troubles getting verifications, we used to have to wait, send out multiple releases to the employers, the different parties that we needed, and we don't always get them back from employers, so we can now, as a last resort, take a personal statement from our clients to move that process along and try and get benefits issued faster and more efficiently than before. The other part is the standardization of our rules. Starting in January of 2015, they're going to be implementing those in stages. So, and that rolls out through 2016. So not a whole lot of detail on that, but just to at least see the timelines and what they're kind of looking at is nice. So that's really, I mean, there's a lot going on. We'll have new worker to train, and with Minshire and EDMS and everything else. We're staying busy.
Be nice to get this year over with all these.
All the work.
Yep, and it'll be nice to have be full staffed again. We have been working a long time with reduced staff, and so it'll be, you know, on all sides. You know, the child support hasn't been running short staffed, but the financial workers have, and it really impacts everybody to the social workers. So yeah, we are hopefully soon we will be full staffed and full speed ahead.
Good.
So,
Just look how much has changed though since the beginning of this year.
oh wow. Yeah, it's, like I
You
said,
guys are still with us, that's great.
It's an adventure.
I don't think next year's going to slow down. It's just like this.
Let's hope it slows down in some areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has there been a lot of cost to the county for the implementation of Minshire?
Minshire, well, we added another staff, so it would just be the staff time. Otherwise, you know, as far as training.
Were those costs you expected, or are they unexpected?
We were given a good heads up about them, so, you know.
So you kind of had it in your budget for last year?
Mhm.
Yeah, if you, I don't know, it's hard to calculate the amount of spinning your wheels time.
Yeah.
You know, there's been, you know, it's been a big learning curve, and it hasn't come out real smoothly, you know, not that the workers haven't tried,
Right.
but the system has,
Yeah.
like you said, a lot of
Yeah.
fixes.
Yeah, and the system was down, they took it down this weekend, and then we couldn't access it yesterday. I haven't been able to get in at all, and had, you know, fixes up at the state. You know, just to add a newborn, so if a woman has a child, it takes about an hour to run through the whole process of adding. If you mess up a step, you just stop. We have to call the state. They have to fix it. There's very specific workarounds, and it's to the point now where we can't even print out directions because they change that quickly.
not always smooth.
It's not, right now, it's not always smooth.
In the end, it's supposed to be great and more like.
It can be, like I said, the success story, if you're successful, you're successful.
Yeah.
There are still some people that applied and are still kind of stuck in the system. I haven't seen a number recently, but they're really, the push is to get further renewals, which seeing how the kickoff went, that's a big concern. And, this Deloitte is good. There is some change in leadership up at Minsure on the board and the directors, so we're seeing things move forward, and they're pretty honest. They were asked, are the fixes going to always take an hour? And they said, yeah, pretty much. So it's slow. You really need to block off time. And when you figure in an 8-hour day, you can potentially work on 8 cases.
When you talk about renewals, does everybody have to renew every year?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who's a manager? Why? Takes up time.
It does. And then, like they said, with the special enrollment, so if somebody lost insurance and they don't have and they need to go through Minsure, I guess, I haven't heard a whole lot here, but the logic isn't always in place, so people may be having difficulties that way. And then we still have people who apply through the system and then apply on paper, and that really makes things messy because then you've got duplicate people out there with duplicate case numbers, and they're trying to find a way to link so that Dana, you are Dana in the system, because right now, every time somebody, if they close and they go back on, it reassigns them a whole new identity. So, and right now we have it where you get a number and that is your number, and every time you reapply, you have the same case number, you have the same identifying numbers. That's not the case in this. So, I mean, when you look at that and how do you link the healthcare cases to the work that we do here, so if you're in cash or food, that's kind of been a nightmare too. So,
Would it help them, Dana?
you can come on up.
It'd be fun to sit down and have a little primer on basics.
Anytime.
Well,
You know,
I don't understand it that well.
Well,
I like
there's
to-
days we don't either. There's days, on the, hoping for a quiet, the rules just keep changing. It seems faster and faster, more and more, so we deal with
I like their administrative simplification that's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping it does what it says, honestly. That's the hope, and we think that way.
it. Trying to make assets the same, verifications the same. So we'll see how that goes. Sometimes as things get simpler, it can be easier, but it's harder on the counties because then when you look at quality control reviews or the feds coming to review our cases, you really have to watch and be accurate, which we want to be accurate and we try to be accurate. It's just when you work with 20 different healthcare programs and the rules are all different, it's, we spend a lot of time researching and looking at our manuals and policy.
Hang in there.
We do, we're good. We're gonna be full stack, so.
Keep smiling.
Like, we'll be good.
Sounds good. Thank you for your report this morning.
Thank you.
Andy,
Are you guys doing a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Can you help them get hooked up? I didn't know this was coming, sorry.
Oh, well, I should be able to figure it out. You got the remote, so you turn them on there.
Andy's right there.
Is it our turn?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh,
All right. Is it set to
It
PC
should be
input?
coming.
It's on video
Should
B.
be hooked in though.
Andy's coming right back.
Stay here then.
Oh, got it. Oh, yeah, I did that. Do you want to say a word first, Ann?
I can.
Good morning.
So, good morning. Good morning. I'm Ann Hutton from Southwell Southeastern Libraries Cooperating. We'll blame the 76 detour for me being a little late. I need to get out of Rochester more often. So I'm here because the county is a member of SELCO, as are the 5 libraries in Houston County. We have a contract between the library, Selco, and the county, which is up for renewal. And so the best thing I thought we should start with is to make sure that, since we certainly have some new faces at the county board level, that the library directors could talk about what they are doing in Houston County for the residents of the county. So, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Liz Gibson-Gosset. I'm the library director at the Houston Public Library.
I'm Lamont Beach, and I'm the director of the La Crescent Public Library.
I'm Marla Burns, Director of Caledonia Public Library.
And Barb Beeson, Director of Polka, wearing a different hat this week.
Are you ready to go? You're still setting up.
Well, it should be coming up any
Okay.
second.
Well, Barb's getting set up. I'll just say,
There it is.
Oh,
There it is.
according to our contract with you all, we agree to provide the county with statistical information that we draw from our annual reports that go to the Department of Education. And, there are many ways to evaluate and measure the services the public libraries provide to all our residents. We kind of concentrate on a few. We look at library visits, total circulation, the number of library programs we offer, attendance at those programs, our reference transactions, and our use of public access computers. So we're going to talk about those statistics, but first Barb has a little slideshow so you can actually see some of the events that occur in the libraries over the course of our contract years.
And Marla will address this.
Yes. At this program, we had 305 people. We were overbooked, but we'll take them every time. This is from the Legacy program. This gentleman we had last summer, and he's an antique appraiser, and it went so well. It was an all-day affair, and he stayed at my home for 2 nights, and that people have asked him to come back again, so he will be here August 9th once again. The petting farm. We lost count. It was out in the park, and after 250 people, they're like little ants scattered all over, but we plan on having them back again. We kind of try to go by what some of the people want again, the children, so it was a great affair. Wanted. This was a Minnesota author who wrote this book, The Minnesota Road Guide to Gangster and Hotspots, and it was so much fun because we could all relate, the people that were there, to the various areas, and it was kind of reminiscing of the old days. And then meet Randy Krulish. He is well known around our area. He has quite a following. He is disabled and has paralysis, and he was very inspiring. We were 125, and that was in the library. It was really inspiring. He is on Facebook, and he gets back to anyone who wants to talk to him. He's a wonderful man. So we're very happy with all the programs we have had. We were talking about MNsure. At our library, we have MNsure come twice a month for those people who want to talk to them and register and whatnot. So I feel we're a full-service library. Sometimes we say we're doing babysitting, marriage counseling, budget counseling, job finders, whatever they need, but that's what we're here for. Thank you.
This is 2 students that played background music when we had the easel display in Holka, and we had a wine and cheese tasting to introduce that. This was the major event this spring. It was 68 children stayed, most of them stayed overnight in the city hall, and they were exposed to old technology, and they all dialed their parents on a working rotary phone. Most of the parents were in the room on their cell phones. They thought that the correction on the typewriter was really a cool thing. And you can see there they're playing the original Pong. There's an original computer. We had cassette music, and we had some hand drills and stuff, but I didn't have anyone to really explain them. And we also showed them, imported Levant's Maddie from La Crescent, and she explained how they could download the books onto their Kindles and their devices from the Selco Overdrive Library. And we also had activities that night. Joe Horian led them, and the only thing we didn't think of was how hungry he would make them, and we had to go down to Quick Trip and get 4 pizzas at 11:30 at night. And this was an event in the park that we just had. the last Thursday in June, and there was 145 people there, and it was the Misty Mountain Boys from Utica, Minnesota, and then there was a caller from Viroqua. And we'll go on to Houston.
There's the Houston Public Library with our award-winning mural that we did through a Picture It Painted program with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation and Valspar Paint Corporation. It was also featured in 2011 on the cover of the Libraries of Minnesota, which was published by the Minnesota Historical Society. In 2011, just the time we had renewed our contract, we actually did a major rehab of the inside of the library. We did a fundraising campaign, raised about $100,000 independent of tax dollars to knock down all the walls, repaint, recarpet and everything. That's on the inside. So next one, Barb. We really pride ourselves on the programming we do. I think you can get that from all of us here. It's a new focus for many of our libraries. We do a Saturday morning story time. This is the end of Easter Saturday morning story time. We read books and do a craft based on a theme every Saturday morning. So it's kind of enter at your own risk and peril on Saturday mornings is what I say. We teach lots of kids clubs and kids classes. This is a kids knitting class that we've done for a couple years now. We're doing another session this summer. We have volunteer teachers that come in and help. And then right now we have about 12 kids in our class, and we're making amigurumi, which is a fancy Nancy word for stuffed animals. So these are a couple of the kids. We also have a kids chess club, which some parents help run, as you can see. To the left there is a yarn bombing project some of you might have seen last fall when you drove through Houston. It was taken on by our adult knitting club and our kids knitting club just as a fun thing to do in support of a Minnesota farm and fiber tour that goes on every fall in southeastern Minnesota. Here is a part of this year's summer reading program. We had the same zoo that was at Marla's Library thanks to the legacy grants. We had about 100 and something kids come, or families, adults and children come to this one. It was a reptile and amphibian zoo. It was a lot of fun for them.
And the snakes
That's
are
a boa,
not slimy.
that's a boa constrictor right there. This is part of our ongoing reading therapy program. It's called the Book Hounds. We have a dog that comes every Monday night, well, almost every Monday night. This is Lexi. Last night we had Angus. And young readers come, and the dog's actually in our little kids' room, and they take turns reading to the dog. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of action in the library, and they're trained therapy dogs.
Okay, to La Crescent.
Well, at the Crescent Public Library, we do a lot of the same things that everybody does. You can just jump to the next slide. This is the igloo that maybe you saw in the news that the now famous Maddie, my assistant librarian, built. And she collected, or we did, milk jugs for about a year to get enough to build this. We were running out of room. We had them stuffed in everybody's garages there. So we had a contest, how many milk jugs do you think? And it's not as easy to count them as you think it is. There was over 360 milk jugs in that.
Oh my God.
She had lights inside. The kids could go in. We had beanbag chairs. They could sit in there and read. So that was a lot of fun. And this just kind of illustrates some of the programming that we do for the kids. Our emphasis is more on the STEM programming, the science and technology. I wrote a grant to the Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers for $2,000 in 2012, and that was kind of our beginning point of doing we were able to buy some of the science kits and the Lego kits, and Legos are not what they used to be, to help develop some of this programming. We did a program through the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with Mindy Moon and the Art of Henna. This was one that we had geared towards teens, and as you probably know, it's hard to keep them interested in activities. She did a wonderful job about talking about the different cultures and the different heritage and the meaning of henna. A lot of kids looked at it as tattoos, but I think we had one teen that said, I think bringing the different arts to the area is a great way to teach teach us how others live and create. And that's really what the arts and cultural heritage is all about. We also showcase local artists in the library throughout the year. They'll bring their art on display. Right now we have a marble statue of a deer. It looks kind of like a overgrown rabbit, but
That goes in the minutes there, Levon.
yeah. Well, it's pink. You know, it's what people interpret it. And he was a local resident, and so we have it on loan for a while. We've also had plein air painting demonstrations, and we did wine and cheese with that. We had about 300 people come, and if you've been in our library, that's a lot of people to get in our library. So we try to promote the local arts. We also did, Mark Moran, the What's It Worth. We hosted that on a Sunday morning Sunday afternoon Memorial Weekend last year. We didn't know how it would turn out. We had 75 people come. We had one young couple that came. They were just going to get their item appraised and leave, but they said it was so much fun. And they also were so interested. He described their piece. They had 2 plaster plaques that had been handed down from great-grandma. And he told them about the area in Europe that it came from. So when they wanted to know when's the library open so we can come and get some books about this area, because they were wanted to read more about it. So that was another cool outcome. We do International Talk Like a Pirate Day. This was Maddie's, one of her passions is that International Talk Like a Pirate Day. This was a fun event. It went on in the evening, 7 to 9 at the library. 2 of our adult volunteers, Mr. Petersley, that you probably know, and Gerald Fiegler, they went out and got their own costumes. Mr. Petersley read pirate stories. Gerald helped with programming. We had different craft stations set up. We had a photo booth for the kids. We had a trunk full of clothes so they could dress up like pirates. We had face painting that the Friends of the Library paid for. Fun event. We also have a knitting club at the library, and it's been going on for a couple of years. We meet on the 2nd and 4th Thursday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. It's an intergenerational group where, for experience through beginning knitters, the experienced knitters take great pride in passing that craft down to the younger kids. We always have a service project going. We've donated over 300 preemie hats to the local hospitals. We've done 700 scarves, mittens to the Salvation Army, 300 chemo hats divided between the 2 hospitals. And our current project are these blankets, which are knit in strips and sewn together, and those are going to the pediatric departments at the 2 local hospitals. So it's kind of fun to have a service project going, so if you want to knit, but you don't really want to start a big project, then you can always take part in the preemie. We have people just bring hats in too.
Okay, Dawn isn't here, but there's some slides here from the Spring Grove Library. Looks like they stayed overnight too. And several of us also had Doug Oman. We had him for the state parks, and you had him for...
There's the library book right in the middle. That's our
You had him
library in the
for
cover,
that.
yeah, for our grand reopening party.
Did you have him?
No.
Okay. And then they use their cinema to have a sing-along. And I might add too that history is real big in Holka, and we just got money from the Minnesota Historical Society for more microfilm. We've received a grant for a microfilm viewer. Caledonia has a digital microfilm viewer, and so does Levon. And I did help the Houston County Historical Society, and they have one now too. And those things bring in tours.
Yeah. So I have some handouts for you here that recap the services that we provided that we agreed to, give you as part of our contract. Does anyone want to address them here?
Yeah, sure.
And just a quick look at them, I did include, I've been working on this committee with the renegotiated contract for 8 years now, so I kind of just added on to the statistics dating back to 2006. But just briefly to look at them, if you look at from 2006 to 2013, library visits have tripled over the course of 8 years. This is in due part due to increased usage. It's also due to better methods of collecting that data. Several of our libraries have installed people counters, so we actually get an accurate count instead of doing a week-long, sample survey that then we multiply and prorate out. Conversely, circulation, which peaked in 2009, has gone down a little bit. Sometimes people think circulation is the only way of measuring the success of libraries, and as you can see, that's not true. It's just one factor in it. And if you look continuing on at the number of library programs that we have offered through the past years, those have also doubled over the course of the 8 years, partially because of the availability of the legacy grants, which we're now getting, but also because of a recognition on all of our parts that that's really what people are enjoying in library services. You saw a lot of the different events, and there are many more that we do on a weekly basis or once a year. A lot of those we get funding from outside grants, from United Way, from the Masons, from Thrive and Financial for Lutherans. Our friends support them. But when I talk to my own patrons, and I think I speak for us all in this, they really say that coming to the library is a quality of life issue. It's about meeting people, having fun. My husband always says I'm the loudest librarian he knows, but when I was a kid, you went in and it was like shh, and you tiptoed over to get a book and leave. It's not that anymore, and I think you saw that from Barb's slideshow that she pulled together today. We also measure our total attendance at those programs. That's also doubled over the years, which makes sense since we have doubled our programming. Reference transactions have gone up about 75% over the period of time. You would think with access to the internet that would actually have gone down, that people would be doing their own research, but really we're finding that those kind of transactions, also people using our public access computers, which you can see over there, have gone up about 25%. It's a little bit more high maintenance, labor intensive, however you want to say that. There's a new generation of people trying to use computers that don't have them at home, they haven't used them, that are required to use them for job searching, for unemployment, for their health insurance, for school work. They're required to use them now. Many people in our county don't actually have access to those services at home. And those numbers do not include our Wi-Fi users. Every time I drive by my library, somebody's out in the parking lot at 11 o'clock at night on an electronic device, and I think they are all over the place. So the numbers you're seeing here are actually just the numbers of people who have come in the doors to use the service. Is there anything else I'm forgetting on all that? I kind of went through this. What we talk about a lot is there's sort of a major paradigm shift, not just in Houston County, but across the state, across the nation, in how people view libraries and how they're using them. And I think that you can see what we're trying to do in response to that demand. Do you guys have anything to add there? No?
No. Yeah. And I like the social aspect because, yes, like in La Crescent this morning, that's why I was a little late, I had the senior meet every Tuesday morning at the La Crescent Public Library for coffee and conversation. And for a lot of them, this is their only outing for the week because we don't have a senior center in La Crescent, other than the community building where they go to eat their lunch. But this is something that they can just come to, and they talk about everything, but it's their out for the week.
Oh, do you want to do that next?
Only because Liz mentioned the legacy programs. I did put together a 2-year summary of the programs that have been funded with legacy dollars. So it's just a quick numerical summary of the programs that happen. As you know, that's part of the state constitution now for the collection of tax dollars for arts and cultural heritage. And libraries around the state receive a small portion of those dollars for library use.
That all? All right. We're doing short and sweet today, huh? All right, so then moving on to money, which is, why we're here. I have 2 sheets you can take one. We look at our funding. Our contract comes up every 2 or 3 years, depending on how it's established. This is a look at funding in all of the Selco region, which is 11 counties, just to give you an idea of where our colleagues are, whether in different cities or different counties in the area. On the second page, the first page, Ann provided some statistics drawn through the Department of Education. I just redid it and put it in order so you can analyze them a little bit more quickly. If you look at within the whole Selco region, so the 11 different counties, the county per capita support currently ranges from $10.91 on the low end to $31.12 on the high end, with the average being about $18.89. The city per capita support, so cities that actually have a library, their per capita support ranges from $17.08 to $80.65, with the average at $41.33. If we move that down to look at Houston County, our 2014, so this is 2012 we're looking at, I'm going to give you the more current statistic. Our 2014 Houston County per capita support for your rural residents is at $15.92, which is below the county average. Whereas the city per capita support within Houston County is about $39.62. So basically, a rural resident of Houston County who walks into any of our libraries has access to exactly the same services, but contributes less than half the per capita tax sum his city counterpart pays for those services. And so if Houston County were to provide the same level of per capita support, your yearly contribution, instead of $134,000, which is what your current contract is, would be $334,000. Nobody's asking that today. However, I've been serving now on this committee for 8 years, and our mutual goal as public servants, whether we're librarians or county commissioners, has been to work towards a more fair and equitable distribution of funding to support the library systems. And to this end, we have successfully negotiated, I think, 4 contracts during this period of time, through recessions and LGA cuts and all that. And we have incrementally increased your per capita support. It was $10.66 in 2006. Its current level is $15.92. And so if you're willing to listen to a proposal, we actually have a proposal for you today. If you want to adjourn and go to small groups at a different time, we can go there too. But we are asking for, let me see, a 3% increase for each contract year. So that would mean your 2015 contribution would go up about $4,000 to $138,000, 2016 $146,000, in 2017, $151,000, and that would bring your per capita support up to $17.90 per rural resident, which is still below the average per capita county contribution in the Selco region. So that is what we are asking for today. It's not ideal for us, but it is a step in the right direction, and we're all comfortable with incrementally getting there. Questions on your part, clarifications on our part?
I think this is a very good thing. This reaches the poor and the rich and every age group, and it's a great thing to have in the county. I definitely support it. Of course, I was on the Selco board for a while too.
You were. It's over the course of the 3 years, it's $9,000 or $10,000 or something, but for us that's a huge sum of money. Every dollar you invest in the libraries, we manage to double and triple between grants, volunteer work, the number of volunteers that help out at our library so that we can do programming, so that we can have fun events. Same thing at Barb's. We have we work very hard to make that dollar go a long way, I believe.
I think so.
No. This is a contract that we would sign with Selco for a 3-year contract. That's what we had the last time. It is part of our, we usually build it in after we approve it, right?
Correct. This county has done things, excuse me, various ways. There sometimes has been a committee with the commissioners, or a subcommittee, that meets with the library directors and myself. There's also been times when the commissioners have simply, as you were doing your budget preparation, voted an increase or voted a dollar amount for the contract. So really, we're here today to sort of give you the background, to sort of fill you in on what's been happening in the libraries, and it really is your choice as to how you want to move forward, whether or not it is you want to have as Liz mentioned, a group to meet with the library directors to discuss finances, if you're in where you are in your budget process, to make sure that there's dollars in the future. Heaven forbid, but should there not be, should we not reach a conclusion by the end of December, there is a clause in the current contract that we continue on at the current rate. Not necessarily what the librarians are hoping for, and this county has always been a very amenable county when it came to needing to discuss funding for libraries and moving forward with the new contract.
And going to a multi-year contract has really helped, because in the early years, we were just on a roller coaster, and not knowing until actually January what we were getting.
And it seems that 3 years works about the best. We've had a 1 or a 2-year contract, and it seems like, not that we don't want to come and visit you, but it seems like we're discussing money like right away again. I do have a couple of counties that have moved to a 5-year contract. With the specific intent that the dollars are then off the table for discussion, because everybody knows what is expected for budgeting, both on the tax side of generating the taxes and on the spending side for the libraries, but then written into the annual calendar is a presentation similar to this to make sure that the commissioners are getting the information about what is happening in the county, aside from just coming for the ask. It really is up to the commissioners as to, how you would like to proceed.
I feel uncomfortable going 3% for the next 3 years. We don't know what we're going to be in 2 years, 3 years from now.
I like the idea of signing a 3-year contract. I think that works, and that's what we did the
The
last
contract's
time.
okay, but the money, I don't know, but I'd like to be able to review it every year.
I think, as part of the budgeting process, we will discuss it then. You'll know what they're asking for, if that's the amount that we want to put in initially for 2015, and we can see what's bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
When does the contract need to be signed?
The official ending date of this contract is December, so we certainly have time for your budget hearings, certification to the state, and even truth and taxation hearings. The process has been, generally, the county board, once the contract has been finalized, the dollar amount in the budget, the county board signs it first. Then my staff will actually make sure that it gets to all of the 5 libraries, so we have signatures by each of those participating libraries, and then Selco. And the only reason it ends up back at the Selco board is that way we make sure that we do indeed have all of the originals back at the Selco office, and then we redistribute. So Char will end up with a file copy that is an original, and likewise, each of the libraries in Selco will have an original signed contract. So, certainly, my goal would be that by the end of December, we're finalized.
We kind of go with a policy that we don't make a motion on spending at the first time we hear it. So we will, this is just such a great service to the county. And I think what I can say, we support our libraries. We just, right today, are not comfortable making a
Impulse spending.
I would just like to add one thing. Please remember when you're making your decision that basically our cities are subsidizing a lot of the rural usage right now. For example, at my own library, 53% of the items that go out to rural users of Houston County, but but the percentage of dollars that come in to support that is only about 43%. So, the cities end up subsidizing the usage of libraries by your residents, and it's something that we've all agreed to work towards, is to bridge that gap.
And this might be something, especially the new commissioners, the library tax is the one tax where it does, the county tax does not go over all of the property value. Minnesota library law has evolved over 120 years, and the city library tax is on city property, and the county board is responsible for levying the tax on the property outside of the city limits. So it's unlike the other taxes that you are levying for the roads and the bridges and health and human services and juvenile services, all of those things, that is over all of the property value. So hence this, what Liz is mentioning, the cities are actually taking on a responsibility. Now, granted, they are also the ones that decided to open a library in those communities. So we're looking for a partnership.
Thank you for your time.
And as Char knows, I tend to be to keep the secretary, so I have the contract on, actually is personally on my computer. So once we can certainly look at the language to make sure that the language is still relevant. Usually, because we've been dealing with pretty much the same words, in all of the counties, we have had access to a number of county attorneys over the years. We tend to find that we are focusing only on the dollar amounts. Once that's negotiated, I'll take care of getting the Word document out to everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Yep, those are yours.
Yeah.
How are you?
The average. Very ordinary.
Ask them if we can dance.
I don't dance.
Thank you. Took us so long.
Hello there.
Sounds good. See you again. Bye.
Yes,
Get my hand up. That's fine. For just another one. Star, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Where you want to come up also with this?
Yeah, those are similar but a little new direction. Yeah. No, I'm just gonna pull that just to see. You know, actually, I'm gonna take that one, I'll take this one. One more background information.
Ready anytime you're ready.
Okay.
A little bit behind.
let's just start. Thank you. I'll just record everything. Great, should I get started?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners, for having me down this nice morning, nice cool fall morning. I'm Bruce with Ellers, and I've been asked to come and chat with you about debt capacity and debt options, and talking a little bit about cash funding versus debt funding of projects. And really, I want this to be informal and conversational. Please stop me if you have questions. We are seeing an increase in bond activity among all of our municipal clients, counties, cities, school districts. I think as folks are starting to see that construction costs are starting to go up and interest rates, we think may finally be at the end of the line in terms of seeing the historic lows that we have. But at the same time, I know that lots of elected officials have questions and concerns about using debt versus cash for financing major projects. So I'm hoping to just provide some helpful information, answer any questions you have, and see if there's any new information that we could provide after today to help you make decisions about some of your major projects going forward. I wanted to just start with this debt profile. This is very similar to what I presented to the county board last October, I think it was, of 2013. And all this does is just outlines your 4 existing bond issues from 2009 and 2010. The numbers or descriptions are up above, along with the debt levies, and then they're represented graphically on the chart below. I would point out, as I did back in October of last year, that these levy numbers are actually 105% of the actual principal and interest that you pay. That's just a statutory thing that you're required to levy 105%, but I want you to know that these numbers are higher than what you're actually paying in principal and interest each year. And you can see that your aggregate debt service is very level for the most part in the $1.2 to $1.4 million range. You don't see any major spikes or dips. The Justice Center and other debt that you incurred 5-6 years ago was really deliberately structured to provide a steady debt service obligation. What I would also point out, however, though, is that pretty soon, given that we're almost to 2015, most of your debt will be either retired, as you can see with the red bonds, the red bond issue, which is your 2009 B bonds. Those will be done as of February of 2019, which is really your 2018 fiscal year. And then all of your other bonds will be callable in part or full after that point. So even though your bonds debt service, the scheduled fixed rate debt service goes out to 2030, you really have the option of either refinancing or interest cost savings if that's feasible at that point, or paying off debt as you or future county boards see fit. So you really have a lot of flexibility within the next 4 or 5 years in terms of what you want to do with both your existing debt levels as well as any new debt levels that you might see fit to incur. So with that, why don't I go to the PowerPoint, and I just wanted to touch briefly on some of these concepts of debt capacity that I talked about a little bit last October. I wanted to start again with the statutory authorities that really govern the types of debt that you have. The first is the overall statutory debt capacity, which is in a formula-driven capacity that is equal to 3% of the county's estimated market value. Your estimated market value is just over $2.2 billion. And so when you look at your existing debt, or your capacity, first of all, that's $66.7 million of debt, which is a lot more than you have. And you've got roughly just under $16 million of existing principal outstanding after this coming payment on 2/1/15, which will be, again, payable from the current fiscal year of 2014. And so when you subtract that $16 million from the $66.7 million, you can see you have remaining statutory capacity overall of $50.7 million, which is about 76% of your total capacity. And your capacity will continue to grow, actually, as your tax base grows and as you retire your existing debt. Going on to the CIP bond capacity, there's another formula for this that is also tied to estimated market value. This is actually governs the amount of total debt service that you can have for capital improvement plan bonds. And CIP bonds is what you would use for highway buildings, general county services buildings, and things like that, other than law enforcement and jail facilities. And so your annual debt service limit for today's fiscal year would be about $2.7 million. Right now, your debt service on your CIP bonds is about $730,000, and so you've got $1.9 million of debt service capacity per year, which is, again, about 73% of total. So you're right around 3/4 of your capacity so far still outstanding. And that's also true of your jail bond capacity. I don't think you have any plans to issue more jail debt, but I wanted to point out that you're also in really good shape in terms of how much of your jail bond capacity you're using. Similar mechanics, different percentage per state law. You can see that your remaining capacity is about 77% of your total statutory capacity. So in all three of those measures by state law, you've got a lot of your capacity, about 3/4 of your statutory capacity for any of those measures. Moving on to credit rating agency considerations, we took another look at your rating report from your last bonds in 2010. As you may recall from the October of 13 discussion, Standard & Poor's took a pretty, relaxed view of your debt load. They said that they considered the county's overall debt low. They gave a couple of percentages, and they said that they really thought that this wasn't a concern, even though your debt was fairly slow in amortizing, because again, you did look to stretch out that impact on county taxpayers for these bigger bond issues in 2009 and 2010. They also pointed out that they really thought your strong fund balances were a key credit positive, and that's not to say that they should dictate your fiscal policy. Certainly that's your job as commissioners. I just wanted to highlight that though, because cash funding versus debt funding has a number of considerations, and if you were to draw down your fund balances to a significant amount, that might cause the Standard & Poor's to revise their credit outlook on the county. So you're in really good shape in terms of debt load and credit quality due to your fund balances. And so I just wanted to point out those two factors there. You actually went up to AA standard. Okay, Carol was pointing out that you had a surveillance rating, so you think you're at straight AA. Okay, so even better then. I'll make that. I'll check that and make that correction. And Carol's making a good point. Standard & Poor's has been doing surveillance ratings on most of its ratings, even if you're not issuing new debt, and so it is not at all surprising that they would have done a one-notch upgrade. Okay. Great. So then finally, let me just touch on tax impact of your existing debt. And compared to most counties that we work with, your debt impact is pretty low by tax standards. Your debt levy, again, at that 105% over levy rate is about 11% of your total tax capacity rate, so it's about 7.2% out of your 64.67%. And then for a house with a $100,000 taxable market value, just using that sort of as a benchmark, you can see that your debt levy, again at 105% is about $52 per year out of the total county levy. And so certainly we know that you're under pressure always to keep a lid on county fiscal impacts, but certainly as a percentage of the overall levy, we don't see that as being an onerous amount as it relates to the debt service impact. Any questions about those review sheets before I move into the broader forward-looking discussion? So then I wanted to go into, again, this conversation that is always playing out with county boards of how to finance major capital projects. Do you save money and pay as you go, or do you issue debt and then pay as you use the resource or a portion of a resource's useful life? And there's really no right or wrong decision, and oftentimes for counties it's not an either-or decision. It's one that a lot of counties will split the decision and do a hybrid approach of using some cash and some debt, either for a number of projects together or even for the same project. So I wanted to point out that I'll be presenting some either-or options, but that's not to say that you couldn't strike a hybrid approach that makes sense for you and for Houston County. For each project, when we're asked to give our thoughts and recommendations on how to finance a project, we really try to dig into affordability and looking at the project costs. Is this a very large project? Looking at your current levy, your current fund balances that could be used for a project, and what are some of the competing uses for that fund balance? And then what are your budget and tax base trends? And one thing that I thought was very interesting, based on my review of the county's fiscal data, is that your tax base has been growing now for the last couple of years, as I'm sure you're aware. A couple of years ago, it was at about 15.25 million. This is your tax capacity. That is really the true tax base. Then you can see it grew by about 4% last year and by another 7% for the current fiscal year, so that you're at about 16.9 million in total tax capacity. We don't, of course, ever want to count on continued tax base growth like that. We certainly saw the tax base growth change and go in the other direction 6-7 years ago. But you're on a positive trend slope at this point, thanks, I imagine, in large part to ag values. And so certainly you've got some additional capacity than you did a couple of years ago. And then equity is a big point. When you're looking at a project with a long useful life, I think there is a valid discussion to be had about whether it makes sense to use fund balances that were really contributed solely by past and current taxpayers, or that makes sense to spread some of that impact to future taxpayers over the 10, 15, whatever year life. Again, people see this different ways, but we do think that there is something to be said for spreading out the cost over a useful life or some period of useful life, especially for long-term assets, not vehicles, not computers, but things that are going to last 40, 50, 60 years. And then in red, I wanted to highlight a question that we've always asked, but I think one that is becoming more relevant now, and that's how do you compare bond costs if you were to bond for a project today or in 2015 versus the cost that a project might come in at if you try to save up money for 5 or 6 years and then do a project, let's say in year 2020 or 2021. And so I wanted to give a couple of examples just to illustrate that. Again, sort of an either-or approach, not to say that you would have to do that, but just to hopefully give you some food for thought on how to tackle some future projects. This next chart is just a trend of the 20-year bond buyer index. It's called, it's a national index of 20-year bond rates that is taken every Thursday of every week. And so you can see that back 30 years ago, we were at basically a high point with that 20-year bond coming in over 10%. In December of 2012, we were at the all-time low point at 3.27%. We've crept up some since then and then come back down. Right now, we're at about 4.3% for that bond buyer index. And you can see that we've had a pretty good run for the last 30 years, and especially for the last 6 or 7 years. I'm not going to say when rates will start increasing because I've been proven wrong before, but certainly as the economy generally goes in the right direction, we would expect competition for capital to increase and for bond rates to have to increase over time in general in order to compete for that capital. Looking at project costs, the Turner Building Cost Index is a nationally recognized indicator of building cost inflation. It's a national indicator, so it doesn't really get to southeastern Minnesota specific trends. But I think the anecdotal evidence that you've probably heard in the private sector is borne out here that we really have seen over the last 3 years or so an increase of building costs as Commodities have increased in cost as well as labor. There's a lot more work for fewer contractors after the compression and contraction that we saw during the recession. And so, just for the last year, we're seeing about a 4% increase. And if you look at those historical numbers before the crash, that is in 04, 05, 6, 7, and 8, you can see that there were numbers well above 4% in terms of annual inflation. Whether we'll see those go-go kind of days again anytime soon is anyone's guess, but I do think it's a reasonable estimate to expect that we would see 3 to 5% project cost inflation over the next few years as the economy generally does continue to move forward. So with that background, I ran a couple of new sets of numbers just for your review. Using an estimated sort of benchmark project cost of $6 million, I understand that that's kind of a proxy that you've discussed for a potential highway department building as well as some fairground improvements as I understand it, maybe some other projects thrown in there as well. I ran a couple of bond scenarios just to give you a sense of where the market is today. I assume that you would issue these bonds next spring or summer. If you did any bonding, it would be roughly a year from now. And so the two bond scenarios that we handed out are really just to give you a ballpark sense of what the debt service would be, and those are in this other packet that was handed out before this discussion. The first scenario assumes that you bond for that $6 million over a 10-year repayment period. So you would start repaying that in fiscal 16, not the next fiscal year, but in the one following that, and go for 10 years. The 20-year scenario is the same, $6 million, but spread out over 20 years. And you can see that the debt levies, again, at 105% of actual, are roughly $726,000 per year for the 10-year scenario, and that is reflecting about a 2.1% fixed interest rate. That is the current market. And actually, if you are at a AA standard rate instead of the AA minus, your rate would be a little bit better than that 2.1%. And then the 20-year bonds, the debt service comes in at an average of $440,000 per year with an average interest rate of about 3.1. And again, your actual rate in today's market would be probably closer to 3%. One thing I would like to point out also, as with your existing debt, you would have the option of calling and prepaying or refinancing any new debt as well. So I think that's important to know that, when you issue debt, you fix the rate. You don't have to worry about rate resets and rates fluctuating, but you also have future flexibility to either pay off early or to refinance if the future board decides to do something different. So with that, I wanted to just look at the cash funding scenario, and we assumed if you wanted to cash fund that $6 million, let's say you decided that starting next year you would save $1 million per year. Let's assume you can invest that money at about 2%. That might be optimistic based on today's interest rate environment, but I assume 2% there, and then I assume 4% project cost inflation. And you can see that if you save $6 million over 6 years and you earned 2% per year on that increasing balance, you'd get to the end of 2020 with about $6.3 million in the bank. If that $6 million project cost increased by 4% per year, you'd be about $1 million short, just under $1 million short, based on these very rudimentary assumptions. And then finally, what does this mean for the county and for county taxpayers? What I tried to do then is compare the cash funding approach to the 10-year debt approach and the 20-year debt approach, and discounted those fiscal impacts to a present value using a 3% present value rate. And everyone has a different opinion about present value, but I wanted to give you just sort of an apples-to-apples view on this. And so using that roughly 3% discount rate, if you look at the cash funding approach, including the shortfall that you would have to make up for in 2020 in order to get to the project cost, you're looking at a total present value impact of about $6.25 million. The 10-year debt approach, even assuming you went out the full 10 years without any early payoff or any refinancing for prevent our interest rates would be just over $6 million. And then the 20-year debt approach, even though you're really spreading it out over a much longer period, is about $6.36 million. And if you used a higher discount rate, if you assumed a higher rate of inflation, actually the longer term impacts would be lower, right? So because it is saying $1 in 2025 or in 2035 is worth a lot less than today in 2014. And so you'd see those 10-year and 20-year impacts actually decrease more than the cash funding approach if you used a higher discount rate. So this isn't to say what you should do, it's just to really give you the sense that you do have a number of different considerations in how you decide to use your cash and your debt resources. We're certainly seeing debt rates being very advantageous still for counties as well as other municipal issuers. We are seeing some concerns about the cost of construction increasing over time. And right now I'm imagining that you're not earning a lot on your cash reserves. And so that's a factor as well. And so maybe this might be the right time to lock in some debt and use some cash and strike a balance that works for you and get some projects done if you see those projects being a priority for the county. Finally, Commissioners, I would point out it's been a number of years since you've been through the debt issuance process, so just going back to this debt scenario and what it might take to get you to something like this in the year 2015. Really, it's about a 3-month process to issue the types of bonds that are contemplated here. So we could theoretically start in April of next year with presenting a draft CIP financing plan to the county board for your green light, if you will. You then in May hold a public hearing that would have to be noticed in the newspapers of record. And then, assuming you saw fit, you would approve the CIP and direct us to move forward with the bond offering. We would take the bids at the end of June on your behalf, and you would award the bonds to the winning bidder in that competitive sale process at your county board meeting that day. And then sometime around the middle of July, you would receive the bond proceeds to start paying construction costs. And of course, that bond timeline can either be moved up or moved back, but I just wanted to give you a ballpark sense of what would be involved there in terms of county actions. So with that, I will stop. Do you have any questions or want to have any discussion about how you might tackle some of these capital projects that I know you've been discussing?
It's very good to see our options here and see figures actually too, Because we don't know exactly what we're going to do yet, what our options are, but the more information we have to make a decision.
One of the reasons I wanted to come down was to compare bonding at today's rates versus inflation, what it's going to cost to build later. I know you don't like that, you're putting on debt. Debt is useful. Debt has made me some money. It's going to make other people money. In a few years, let's say we bond at 3, in a few years, and I guess I don't want to be wrong either, guessing what it's going to do, but at some point in the future, our fund balance is going to be making more money than our debt balance. It's going to happen. It has in the past, and it will in the future. It's just a matter of when. We don't know when. We're in an opportune time, I believe. If we're ever going to bond, now's the time to do it. But I guess, my thinking is I want everybody on board before we do it.
And what would our debt capacity be with a $6 million? Is that in here?
No, yeah, so I did not include that in the PowerPoint, but Commissioner Storley, I did do some calculations here. If you turn to that, the debt service numbers, and assume you just did a bond issue, just like these, right? And look at your CIP bond capacity, because that's the kind of bond that you would use for the highway shop improvements and or fairground improvements. You basically, with a 10-year scenario, you would use another 27% of your total capacity. So if you looked at that CIP bond, you're at about you've used 27% before, you'd use another 27%, so you'd still be somewhere around 40% of capacity, and actually, again, that capacity would go up again as you paid off the old bonds and as your tax base increased. So you'd use roughly another quarter, if you will. And then if you did a 20-year bond issue, you'd use about 16.5% of your CIP bond capacity. So you'd be somewhere around 55% left. You'd still be over half of your capacity left.
And what's considered good debt, when are we at too high a level?
Right. There's no one who's going to tell you that you use too much of your statutory capacity unless you overwrite. The state auditor might have something to say at that point, but we have some counties that have used much more of their CIP bond capacity or their jail bond capacity, and there's no red light in terms of somebody saying, hey, you only have 25% of your capacity left or 15% of your capacity. For me, it really is more about tax impact and credit rating impact. As well as if you know you have another major project 5 years from now that is going to need the same bonding capacity, you of course don't want to use all of it and then be stuck 5 years from now, right? But it's my impression that you really don't have anything else major on the horizon that would cause that to be a major concern. So for me, it's really about your credit rating, which is in very, very good shape at the AA level, especially what they said back in 2010, and also tax impact, and that's really a decision that is pretty easy to pencil out and to decide for you as commissioners what makes sense. So long story short, there's no guideline, but you are pretty far from even getting close to a danger zone in terms of your utilization of statutory capacity.
So, an additional $6 million of bond debt, that wouldn't change our S&P rating?
No.
No.
Debt itself is a very small part of their rating methodology, believe it or not. They look more at fund balance and overall fiscal stability, as well as some things that you can't control, like tax base and other economic indicators. But really, for them, fund balance and fiscal management are king in terms of what drives the rating. Sure, they pay attention to debt, but this would not be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just need to
No,
know
please go
something.
for that.
Okay, where it says our county tax impact for residential homestead with 100,000 taxable market value.
So what I did is I calculated, Commissioner Storley, your overall fiscal 14 tax levy for that home, and that's about $464 in the current fiscal year. And then I looked at that 105% debt levy that you have based on your existing debt, and that works out to be about $52 of that 464. So the 52 is a subset or a portion of the larger number, and it's about 11%.
So do we have a number on what kind of impact it would have? A $6 million.
A new $6 million?
Yeah.
Sure, I can do that. It's pretty easy. So if we looked at your tax capacity, it's 16.9, and everyone can do this at home too. Should I do the 10-year or the 20-year? Your choice?
10-year.
The 10-year one? Okay. So all you'd really do is divide the 726,180 into, it's more than 16.9, but I'll do that. You get a rate of it's 4.29, almost 4.3%. So then if you multiply that by, it's bizarre, I know, but a house with a taxable market value of 100,000 has a tax capacity of 718 thanks to the market value homestead exclusion that all your finance
staff wants to grapple with that. So if you multiply that 4.3% times 718, you get $30.85. And that's on the 10-year bond issue.
$30.85.
Correct. And as you go along, commissioners, if we have some charts that model tax impacts for all sorts of different classes of property and all sorts of values, because market value exclusion, phases out as a property has more value, so it's hard to sort of compare apples to apples precisely, but we would be happy to run those tax impact numbers. If you go further down the path and say, we really want to drill down on a 10-year bond or a 15-year bond or whatever it is.
I think ag property would be one that you would definitely want to look at.
For sure, that's going to be a decline.
Yep, when we do ag value, just pure ag, and we also do one assuming a residential homestead on the ag property as well. Yep.
Okay, that's all good stuff.
We're numbers geeks. So don't ever feel like you're asking us for too many numbers.
I like to see the number, I just don't
Sure.
care how I got it.
Yeah. I think people are usually surprised by how low the numbers are, and it's because you do actually have, for a fairly small county in terms of population, you have a lot of tax base. The fact that your estimated market value is over $2 billion, it's probably a big reason why you were upgraded by S&P. That speaks to them, along with your fund balances, having a lot of capacity to do whatever you want to do. So I guess what I would really encourage you to do is don't defer those capital projects because they will get more expensive. You either pay cash or issue bonds or do something together, but we've seen a lot of counties wait and had those project costs slip away, whether it's a road project or a building project. And I understand the reasons for kicking the can down the road, but I think the one thing we would all agree on is that building things will get more expensive, regardless of what you think will happen to your fund balances.
And just what it was going to cost and that if we cut it back now, it's still going to cost what it would have for the bigger project when they first brought it out.
Actually more, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, we're here to support you in whatever decision you want to make. So please let us know if we can provide more information.
We'll be in touch.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming down. Thank you.
Sure.
Must be 10:30, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's still morning, right?
Yes, right.
You've been waiting for us to show up with this, I know you have.
Yes, you have.
Yes, you have. You know that you have this electronically, but as we kind of wanted to review with you this morning, the drafts of the ordinances, we did use a small tree to make copies here for you. Should have 3 things. Wanted to do a introduction here. I think that you all have had an opportunity to listen to Erin Simmons from the American Lawn Association. She was in our March board meeting where she did some presentation to us on what was happening statewide with regards to the electronic delivery devices known as e-cigarettes, as well as what was happening kind of at the legislature at that time. So you know Erin. And for just 1 second, I really would like to acknowledge the work that's been done by our staff. All of this that you see before you today was not done solo by any means. The preparation, the research, the polling of our hospitality industry, this lineup behind me here with regards to our staff and our student interns. It's been a real privilege to be able to work with them, and it's been integral really to the due diligence process of the work that's before you today. As well as we've had several conversations and consultations with Erin from American Lung, who works extensively with the Tobacco Law Center, so that this information that's before you today has been reviewed and re-reviewed by the Tobacco Law Center folks. Our county attorney has taken a look at it. The sheriff's office has been involved in reading the draft, as well as our county auditor. We've had conversation with her as well. So I guess it's all to say that we believe that we've done a due diligence process in the work that's before us today. Some people, lots of time, have put effort into these two documents that are before you today. So just to give you a kind of background here, in March, you remember at the Joint Power Board of Hearing, or the Joint Board of Health meeting with Gilmer County, Erin did do this presentation with regards to what's happening statewide. And you gave us a directive at that time as the Board of Health to move forward with drafting some ordinance language to really address the issues around the electronic delivery devices known as e-cigarettes, and to make some updates to our existing tobacco sales licensing ordinance for citizens of Houston County. It isn't unusual to revisit from time to time our ordinance work, and simply to update, and particularly in this instance where we really want to stay relevant with what's happening in the industry, the tobacco industry. So you know that there were some, at the end of the legislative sessions, that the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act was amended to some degree to restrict the use of e-cigarettes in certain places. But we believe that there still is work to be done, and particularly at a local level, because we really are interested in closing some loopholes in the interest of protecting the public's health. So that's what we're here today to do. If you wouldn't mind, what we kind of thought our process would be today is, we don't want to belabor this, but yet we want to make sure we give you every opportunity to understand what it is that we're presenting. Go through the changes. What we would like to do is review the two ordinances that are before you, draft ordinance number 5 and the draft of the companion ordinance number 14. Give you some opportunities to ask some questions and concerns. We'll go through those, I'll go through those, and actually be kind of rather rapidly, because you had those to preview before now. And then I would like Erin to maybe give you a high-level overview of what's happening kind of statewide, some current information about some statewide polling data, as well as just kind of a brief on what other communities' activities are doing, so that you know that what we're doing is it falls in line with what other communities and counties are doing, but it is fairly progressive, and it is an aggressive ordinance work that we're presenting today. And then at the conclusion, really, what we would like is, our ask for today is that after, if there's any amendments that need to be made, or questions that we need to answer, or more work that we need to do, but we really would be ask for your consideration to set a date for a public hearing, which would be held on August 5th, after the appropriate public notice would be put in the paper. So that's our ask for today. So before you, we have the two ordinances. Ordinance number 14, I think we'll just start right there, because that's the short one. We can get right through that. And that really is the ordinance that is concerning the electronic delivery devices. And when we talk about electronic delivery devices, I think you all have seen kind of our display. I won't take it out today, but with the flavors and the actual device itself that heats up this substance and vaporizes it out into the air is what we're talking about here. But I do want to just make sure that everybody's clear in what we're talking about. So I am going to read portions of this. I'm not going to read all of it. So in section 1, where it talks about the purpose and intent, what we're talking about is unregulated electronic delivery devices. And we're going to refer to that for the rest of our conversation today as e-cigarettes. Closely resemble and purposefully mimic the act of smoking by having users inhale vaporized liquid nicotine or other substances created by heat through an electronic ignition system. We have some concerns because the FDA has determined that various samples tested contain not only nicotine, but also detectable levels of known carcinogens and toxic chemicals, including a toxic chemical that's used in antifreeze. I'm going to skip down a little bit more, talking about e-cigarettes produce a vapor of undetermined and potentially harmful substances, which may appear similar to smoke emitted by traditional tobacco products. Their use in workplaces and public places where smoking of traditional tobacco products is prohibited creates concern and confusion and leads to difficulties in enforcing smoking prohibitions. So the rest of this, we get on to section 2, which actually gives you more detail of the definitions of the electronic delivery devices. I want to call your attention to section 3, prohibition. And this is kind of the heart of what this draft of ordinance number 14 is. The use of any electronic delivery device is prohibited. Anywhere smoking is prohibited by the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act. And so we're talking about really this bringing it back to the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act. We want the use of this device not to be able to be used anywhere where smoking is. Section 4 talks about other applicable laws. This ordinance is intended to complement the Minnesota Clean Indoor Act, and we know that there may be down the road times to amend it should something else kind of come before us. And then section 5 talks about violation and penalties, and I just want to call your attention to subdivision 3 where it talks about penalties. A person who violates any provision of this ordinance shall be guilty of a petty misdemeanor. Okay, so that's ordinance 14. Any questions? It's pretty clear on what it is that we're talking about. Any concerns?
It looks good. I've read it before too, so. I know we were really concerned with the way they reach to middle school age kids and
exactly, yeah.
Bubble gum flavor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mary, this would be for any place. This would basically make e-cigarettes exactly like ordinary cigarettes.
Exactly. Okay, then ordinance number 5 is really kind of a redraft, so to speak, of the existing ordinance that you already had in place in Houston County with regards to licensing. It's the ordinance that regulates the possession, sale, and consumption of tobacco and tobacco-related devices and products within Houston County. So we're just going to kind of move forward with this. This one's a little bit lengthier, and then we do have some things that we really do want to call your attention to. Anything that you see that's highlighted, and it's kind of tough for you to see there, but in your copies it's dark, and in my copies it's yellow. But those are the new provisions to the existing ordinance that already is in effect in Houston County with regards to the sale of tobacco and tobacco products. And one thing I just wanted to define for you too is you'll see a lot we talk about the nicotine and lobelia delivery devices. And lobelia really is in its form a toxic herb. Those of you that are gardeners will see lobelia all over the place. It's those pretty little blue kind of periwinkle flowers, and some of them are white. But in its herb form, we think it can be potentially very dangerous. It is, and it acts much like nicotine, but it is less potent. But we don't really want people to be vaping and smoking this in our presence either. So that's why that language, you'll see that in here many times. As I was looking it up a little bit, the history really of lobelia is interesting, that physicians used to use that for inducing vomiting. And in fact, its slang name is called puke weed. So that's just a little trivia for you today. Okay. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and go through this. Again, ordinance number 5, looking at section 1, purpose and intent. It adds nicotine and lobelia delivery devices. And also in this section, it does expand on research and best practices, is what's in that highlighted area there. On page 2, it just, again, adds more language, more clarifications with regards to the definitions, again, including nicotine and lobelia and delivery devices in all of that language. It clarifies electronic delivery devices, which is the same language, same definition that's in the previous ordinance that we just looked at. Clarifies indoor area, what we mean by that. Again, at the bottom of that page, talking about nicotine and lobelia delivery devices, clarifies the use of that. On the top of the next page, looking at self-service merchandising, again, area of concern. We want to make sure that electronic delivery devices is included in our language and make sure that it's handled the same way that tobacco products are. We have added the definition of smoking, again, to include inhaling or exhaling vapor from an electronic delivery device. We've added synthetic cannabinoids, which is your synthetic marijuana. Tobacco and tobacco-related products. Again, it just clarifies more about tobacco products, and tobacco product has been approved by the USDA for the sale of tobacco cessation, or it just excludes that for medical purposes, should that come about. It clarifies what we mean by tobacco products shop. And a tobacco product shop shall mean any licensed retail establishment that derives at least 90% of its revenue from tobacco or tobacco products, and where no person under the age of 18 is present or permitted to enter at any time. Again, we've added in some of the next definitions in this section. Again, the language with electronic delivery devices, or e-cigarettes, nicotine and lobelia. We move on to section 3, which is the licensing portion of this. We did add letter D, talking about fees. No license shall be issued under this section until the appropriate license fee shall be paid in full. The annual tobacco license fee shall be established by resolution by the county board, and I believe ours is $100 at this time. Again, the same language as the previous ordinance. The next page is really where we want to spend a little bit more attention, give a little bit more attention, and this addresses some of the earlier conversations that we had at the Board of Health meeting with regards to the sampling issue. So letters K through P are all new language to this ordinance. So I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about that. Smoking is prohibited in tobacco product shop. So that means that smoking shall not be permitted and no person shall smoke indoors at any location with a tobacco retail license. Smoking for the purposes of sampling tobacco, tobacco-related products, plant products, or electronic delivery devices shall be prohibited. Letter L talks about the issuance as a privilege and not a right. It's pretty self-explanatory. M talks about smoking. Again, we're concerned about this sampling issue outside of other places that just sell the tobacco product, a tobacco shop. Smoking shall not be permitted and no person shall smoke within the indoor area of any establishment with a retail tobacco license. Again, for the purpose of sampling of tobacco, we want to prohibit that.
M talks about the minimum clerk age. An individual must be at least 18 years of age to sell tobacco products, tobacco-related devices, or electronic delivery devices on behalf of a person licensed under this ordinance. O is also new, the proximity to youth-oriented facilities. No license shall be granted pursuant to this section to any person for any retail sales of tobacco, tobacco products, tobacco-related devices, or electronic delivery devices within 1,000 feet of any school, playground, house of worship, or youth-oriented facility as measured by the sorted line between the space to be occupied by the proposed licensee and the occupied space of the school, playground, house of worship, or youth-oriented facility unless, and here's the grandfather clause, unless that person has been in the business of selling such products in that location before the date